A mystery. Why did the US compromise in the US-China London talks? Why did chips for rare earths become the focus? Why did the US compromise after repeated flip-flopping? Hello everyone, I'm Old Lou, and I've been closely following international affairs. Recently, another significant event unfolded on the international stage, the conclusion of the US-China London talks. These negotiations were truly captivating. Beneath the seemingly simple framework agreement, strong undercurrents and many untold stories were hidden. Today, I'm here to analyze it thoroughly for you so you can understand it all at once. The two-day US-China London talks concluded on the banks of the River Thames. The moment representatives from both sides signed the framework agreement in principle at Claridge's hotel, global capital markets and geopolitical observers simultaneously held their breath. The most revolutionary outcome of these talks, widely regarded as a turning point in the tech Cold War, was the US's proactive proposal of a chips for rare earths deal. This industry, once central to the US Department of Commerce's technology blockade list against China, has now become a bargaining chip for rare earth resources. This dramatic reversal hints at strong underlying currents. Looking back, since the US enacted the Export Control Reform Act in 2018, restrictions on chip exports to China have continuously escalated. From cutting off 5G chip supplies to Huawei and upgrading the Wassenaar Arrangement, to establishing the Chip 4 Alliance with the 2022 Chips and Science Act, the US has attempted to exclude China from the global semiconductor supply chain through executive orders, technical standards, and international rules. The current willingness to ease restrictions is akin to sacrificing a piece in a strategic game, forcing us to re-examine the strategic considerations behind it. It's noteworthy that this deal is by no means a simple exchange of resources. Rare earths, known as industrial vitamins, are irreplaceable in fields such as new energy vehicle motors, wind turbine magnets, and missile guidance systems. China, with 30% of global reserves, accounts for over 70% of the refining capacity. Meanwhile, chips, the industrial grain of the digital age, see US companies long monopolizing high-end manufacturing processes and design tools. When these two strategic resources were brought to the negotiating table, it was effectively a deep game between the US and China on the two strategic issues of supply chain security and industrial upgrading. A recent report from the White House Council of Economic Advisors shows that the US defense industry faces an 85% rare earth deficit, while China's semiconductor self-sufficiency has surpassed 30%. These realities may be the key factors prompting the US to compromise. Next, I will first explain the deeper reasons behind the chip and rare earth exchange in these negotiations, then examine the true intentions behind the US's sudden compromise after repeated flip-flopping, and compare the situations of other countries in similar resource and technology competition. Finally, I will analyze the impact of these talks on global technological development and world security and peace. I believe that after reading this article, you will have a brand new understanding of US-China relations and the global situation. Let's start by discussing rare earths and chips, and why they became central to these negotiations. Rare earths, despite the rare in their name, are not actually scarce on Earth. China, in particular, possesses abundant rare earth resources. So why are they so important? Because rare earths play a vitamin-like role in modern industry, akin to industrial gold. From batteries for new energy vehicles to the smartphones we use every day, from high-end military equipment like satellites and missiles to emerging industries like wind power generation and energy-efficient lighting, rare earths are ubiquitous. Without rare earths, many modern technological products simply cannot be manufactured. Take the United States, for example. Its high-tech industry is highly developed, and its demand for rare earths is enormous. However, the US's own rare earth industry is very weak, and its refining technology lags far behind China. Data shows that approximately 80% of US rare earth imports come from China. What does this mean? It means that a large part of the US high-tech industry is actually dependent on China's rare earth supply. Once China restricts rare earth exports, many US high-tech companies, and even military enterprises, could face production halts. For instance, many critical components of the US F-35 fighter jet require rare earth materials. Without rare earths, this supposedly world's most advanced fighter jet might be left gathering dust in its hangar. This is not alarmist. Previously, after China implemented new export licensing mechanisms for rare earth-related items, U.S. military and related enterprises faced obstacles in acquiring critical rare earths like neodymium magnets, leading many companies to complain bitterly. Therefore, the U.S.'s desire for rare earths is real, and its willingness to trade chips for rare earths this time is also a consequence of being forced by reality. From this, we can also see that China's rare earth industry holds a pivotal position in the global industrial chain. This is a trump card in our hands and an important source of confidence in international competition. Now, let's talk about chips. Chips, these tiny silicon wafers, can be considered the heart of modern technology. From computers to mobile phones, from artificial intelligence to the Internet of Things, almost all electronic devices rely on chips. The United States has always been a world leader in the chip sector, possessing the most advanced technology in numerous top chip companies, such as Intel and Nvidia, which are undoubtedly household names. By virtue of its advantage in chip technology, the U.S. has long dominated the global tech industry and reaped huge profits. Moreover, the U.S. has used chips as a political tool, frequently imposing sanctions on other countries and restricting chip exports. Previously, it heavily sanctioned Chinese companies like Huawei, attempting to curb the development of Chinese tech companies by cutting off chip supplies. However, the U.S. did not anticipate that China's investment in chip R&D would continuously increase. Although there is still a gap with the U.S., China is catching up step by step and has achieved many breakthroughs. For example, Huawei's Kirin chips have demonstrated the strength of China's chip industry. Furthermore, China's vast market demand also provides ample space for the development of the chip industry. If the U.S. continues to weaponize chips, it will not only harm its own corporate interests but also accelerate the rise of China's chip industry. The U.S.'s willingness to compromise on the chip issue this time is partly to ease the pressure on domestic companies' demand for rare earths, and partly due to its realization that continuing to be tough will not benefit itself. This also reflects that in today's technological globalization, it is difficult for any country to monopolize a key technology and suppress other countries by itself. Let's look at the true intentions behind the U.S.'s compromise this time. U.S. Secretary of Commerce Rutnick stated that the framework agreement means that the U.S. and China will clearly implement the Geneva Consensus. What does that mean? Simply put, the U.S. has finally realized that its previous flip-flopping and extreme pressure tactics in U.S.-China relations were ineffective and only led to embarrassment. Now, sitting down for sincere negotiations is the most beneficial option for itself. But is the U.S. truly thinking this way? Not really. The U.S. has always had a hegemonic mindset, accustomed to being the boss in international affairs and having others follow its lead. This compromise is largely forced by circumstances. From an economic perspective, the U.S. economy is currently facing many problems. The trade deficit remains persistently high, and domestic companies face rising costs due to trade and tech wars, impacting many companies' profits. Take the U.S. auto industry, for example. The big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, were on the verge of production halts due to China's restrictions on rare earth exports. And the Chinese market is crucial for U.S. auto sales. If they lose the Chinese market, these automakers will face tough times. Also, in U.S. agriculture, large quantities of agricultural products cannot be sold, leading to widespread complaints from farmers. Therefore, the U.S. urgently needs to reach an agreement with China to alleviate economic pressure. From a technological perspective, although the U.S. leads in high-tech fields such as chips, China's catching up speed is too fast. If it continues to decouple technologically from China, U.S. companies may lose the huge Chinese market and opportunities for investment and cooperation in China, which is also detrimental to the development of the U.S. tech industry. Moreover, China has taken the lead in some emerging tech fields, such as 5G and artificial intelligence. The U.S. also wants to gain some benefits or limit China's development through negotiations. Therefore, the U.S.'s compromise this time is more of a strategic adjustment, aimed at gaining more advantages in future competition. This also reminds us that in interactions with the U.S., we must not let our guard down and must always remain vigilant to discern the US's true intentions. Let's compare the situations of other countries in similar resource and technology competition. Take Japan, for example. Japan is also a resource-poor country and similarly relies on imports for critical resources like rare earths. However, Japan has taken a series of measures when facing resource dilemmas. On one hand, it has vigorously developed resource recycling technologies to improve resource utilization efficiency. For instance, Japan's technology in electronic waste recycling is highly advanced, capable of extracting large quantities of rare earths and other rare metals from discarded electronic products. On the other hand, it has actively invested in rare earth mining and other resource projects overseas, attempting to control the sources of supply. In the technology sector, while Japan has advantages in some traditional manufacturing technologies, it has fallen somewhat behind the US and China in emerging fields such as chips and artificial intelligence. To enhance its competitiveness in these areas, Japan has increased investment in scientific research, encouraged cooperation between enterprises and universities, and cultivated a large number of scientific and technological talents. Looking at Europe, Europe is relatively richer in resources but also lags behind China in rare earth refining technologies. In terms of technology, Europe has its own advantages, such as in aerospace and high-end manufacturing. However, in today's increasingly fierce global technological competition, Europe also faces significant challenges. European countries have strengthened cooperation, established joint research projects, integrated resources, and collectively enhanced their scientific and technological strength. For example, the EU's Horizon Europe research program has invested significant funds to support scientific research and innovation. By comparing the situations of Japan and Europe, we can see that each country has its own strategies for dealing with resource and technology competition. China has its unique advantages in rare earth resources and technological development, but it must not be complacent. It should learn from the experiences of other countries and continuously enhance its own strength. At the same time, this also indicates that in the grand global chess game of resources and technology, countries are interdependent yet competitive. Only through cooperation and innovation can win-win results be achieved. The framework agreement reached in the US-China London talks has far-reaching implications for global technological development and world security and peace. From the perspective of technological development, if China and the US can cooperate in areas such as chips and rare earths, it will greatly promote the stability and development of the